What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Wizards of Amazon podcast, where we cover all things private label. My name is Carlos Alvarez, and I'm going to be your host on this show. On today's episode, we have a very close friend of mine, Yamaris Diaz, CPA, which I recently learned to say CPA afterwards. So how are you, Yamaris?
I'm good. How are you? I'm excited to be here.
I'm super excited to have you on. Since I have no doubt that you are going to be a regular on this show, especially with your very specialized information. Can you, for our guests, since I already know you, can you introduce yourself, speak a little bit about before e-commerce, maybe even before, bookkeeping, accounting, CPA life and all that there, and then how we get here on this podcast?
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I'll start from the beginning. I think my story resonates with a lot of people. I'm an immigrant. I came to this country from Cuba when I was 8 years old. My parents, I have two sisters, and my parents, actually my mom won like the legal immigration lottery, which I always tell that story because it's kind of cool and people don't know about it. So basically it's a lottery and to immigrate legally to the United States. So we came to this country through that, and 5 months later we found out that my dad had won it too, which just meant that we were destined to come and destined to be here. And the main reason why people immigrate to the United States is for the opportunity, right? For the whole American dream. And I'm very grateful for my parents, because I honestly would not be sitting here today if it weren't for this very scary decision that they made. So that's how I came here. I fast forward to college. I studied accounting, and I started my career in auditing. So I started with a Big Four firm. I was there for a couple years, but quickly realized that that's not the path that I wanted to take in my accounting career. Just because even though it was an amazing opportunity and I learned a lot, those firms really do mold you. It was just a lot of hours. I had just gotten married, so I was a newlywed and was barely seeing my husband at night. I would come home sometimes at 11 o'clock at night, and I quickly realized that if I didn't have time to spend with my husband or with my family, that's just not a life that I saw myself having. And I did have the entrepreneur bite, bug from the beginning, just because my mom was an entrepreneur early on after immigrating here, and years later after I met my husband, he was also a business owner. His family, they were all business owners. So I kind of had that always in the back of my mind, but I never pictured myself as an entrepreneur. So fast forward, like more than 10 years later, I have my babies, and that changes everything. I mean, you know that you have kids now, and it really does change your perspective. It changes your priorities in life. So I was working in a smaller firm. It was a local firm and amazing, very flexible with their hours, and I loved working there. I felt like part of the family, but nothing beats having your own flexibility and and making your own hours. So after baby number 2, I quickly realized that, and we just decided, me and my husband, to just go all in, and I was going to become an entrepreneur too. So that's where I am today. I have an e-commerce business called Ecom Owl. So it's accounting for e-commerce. So we do anything from bookkeeping to tax work, focusing on Amazon and online sellers.
That's awesome. Some of that, we recently did a Facebook Live in the Wizards of Amazon Facebook group regarding you're going to be one of the speakers at Online Seller Cruise, and that was my first time hearing about the lottery. Out of curiosity, how hard is it to hit the lottery once, let alone twice in a single
I was
family?
thinking about that. Like, I have no idea what the chances are. I don't know if it's like 1 in a million is exaggerating it too much, but I wouldn't doubt it if it was that hard. I mean, the chances are very slim.
Okay.
But
Well,
I should find that out. That's actually a good thing to know,
destiny.
the
I like that.
statistic, because I'm sure it's,
Yeah,
I think it was very rare what happened to us, for sure.
for sure. Now, you have a ton of specialized knowledge that comes, like you brought what you learned and know as an accountant, and you've applied that, correct me if I'm wrong, as a specialty even towards e-commerce sellers and Amazon specifically. It's challenging to talk about e-commerce and not Amazon nowadays.
Yeah.
So it would take a bazillion hours to cover all of the different aspects of how accounting affects e-commerce. can we, for the sake of this episode, and because I have a feeling after this episode, everyone's going to feel like they just drank out of a fire hose. And so that they're not totally fried and don't tune out. Can you give me, let's say, what would you call in your experience the top 7? Do you think we can keep it at 7? The top 7 tax tips for Amazon sellers. What, in your opinion?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, there's a lot more than 7 tips that I can give you, and but if we can keep, if I can think of the most important ones, I would start with number 1, picking the right entity. I see a lot of people starting out, a lot of sellers start out, and they hear advice off of the internet, an article they read, or some accountant that they're getting advice from, and they think that this is right for them, and they start right off the bat as a corporation, as an S corporation. And the fact of the matter is, when you're starting out, you really don't need to start out as an S corporation. You're just kind of creating more costs for you, and more filing responsibility, more filing requirements. When really, when you're starting out and you're just selling, usually the progression is just a sole proprietorship, right? You really don't have to do anything. You can just start selling. You don't have to register a company or nothing like that. And then once you realize that, actually, from the beginning, I recommend this if you think you're going to be serious, the next progression would be an LLC. And then the S corporation comes into play later down the road when you want to start taking more money out of the company. It comes into play when you start saving money on self-employment taxes. So it becomes kind of like a tax strategy to elect to be taxed as an S corporation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should start right off the bat as an S corporation, especially if you don't know where you're taking this business. So that's like one mistake that I see a lot of people doing.
What about, so you're saying if somebody is just thinking about, because not everybody that starts in Amazon, just because somebody has a business doesn't mean they're an entrepreneur, which I think is a common misconception. But so if somebody wants to start a business, but they're kind of unsure, they don't know if it's going to work, and they're in that really stage, like they'd like to do something different and they're just giving this a try, what you're suggesting is a sole proprietorship.
Yeah, I would start out that way for sure. I think it depends on what kind of business you're going to be and what you're going to start selling. If you're going to be a branded business, like you're going to have a private label and all that, it's going to become more important, as you know, to have that LLC and to have to be a more official company. But if you're just like reselling online here and there and you want to just try it out, just start as a sole proprietorship. And when you realize that this is viable and something that you want to do, register your LLC and eventually the S corporation. Now, the S corporation, I say that it's a progression, but it really depends on what your goals are for the business. Because at the end of the day, it's what your personal finance goals are. If this is like a side hustle and you don't really need the money coming from the business to pay your bills, I would advise that. But if you're relying on money and if you need to take out money from the business, then maybe you can do the election earlier on if you are going to be taking payroll for the business, just so you can maximize on, payroll tax savings. So it really depends on what your personal goals are once you start your business.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about, what would be your second?
Yeah, so that leads me to like not mixing business with personal. Ooh. So even though you're starting out, and that this is huge, right? Like so many people make this mistake, and it's inevitable sometimes when you're starting out. Like maybe you don't have a business bank account yet, and like you need to use your personal bank account to start whatever, maybe purchasing inventory, or maybe even like registering your LLC or whatever. But don't forget to be organized, and don't forget that it's very important to have a separate bank account for your business. If you're a sole proprietorship, you don't even need to have the bank account in your business name. Like it could just be a separate checking account that you designate for your business, just to make sure that everything is separate, right? And you're gonna be so grateful at tax time, because at the end of the day, what does that do for you? It just creates headaches, because at the end of the year, you're gonna have to go and review your bank statements and say, okay, what was personal, what was business, and you're gonna hate yourself. So just, if that's like anything that you can take away from our conversation today, would be that. Be mindful that for credit cards, sometimes people also think that it needs to be in the business name. If you're not there yet, just have a personal business card that you designate for the business only, and you don't do personal transactions through that business card. Does that make sense?
Yeah, hold on. Let me confess to something and then try to unpack the last part of what you said to see if I got it right.
Okay.
I think at times I'm allergic to accountants. No offense. You're like a best friend, but
I
uh,
mean, it's not unheard of what you just
yeah.
said.
And then my wife's a CPA, loosely, but she's a CPA, so go figure. But okay, so the confession part first is when I first started my business, businesses. As a matter of fact, for years, I definitely, what is the word? Commingling funds? Is that the correct term?
Yes. Yeah.
So I definitely commingled funds. I was just like, oh my God, an order needs to be placed. I know this is profitable. I need to buy this. The only one that has, sometimes it was half the available funds were on a personal card, half were on a business card. And I even asked the person, excuse me, the vendor, I need you to split the purchase. So I was really bad. I would transfer funds and make sure there was no shortfalls that way. But so I'm definitely was guilty of that. And here's the other thing. I don't know a single entrepreneur that didn't do that starting. So it must be the
Yeah.
vast majority of people that mess up in that way, right?
Yes, I think so too. And it's really not a matter of like doing it from the beginning. It's just how fast you catch yourself and how fast you fix it. So a year down the road, it's sent to do your taxes and they're like, oh, maybe I should start changing that. But then you go back to your old ways and you don't do it. All of a
Mm.
sudden, you're 2, 3 years on the road and you're in the same situation. So it's better to catch yourself early on and start fixing it. And don't worry about so much about the past. You know, maybe an accountant can help you with that and fix the past when it's time to do your taxes. But focus like from now on, you know, just focus on the future. So start saying, okay, from now on, I'm just gonna use this card for business expenses. And
Okay,
don't
so
worry about the past.
so to unpack the second part, I think you might have just did that right there when you said, if your business doesn't have a credit card right now, instead designate a card and just use it for business. Did you mean, because that happens to almost everybody. You start a business and the bank's not giving you a credit card yet, or
Yeah,
they'll give you a credit card, but it's really pulled under your personal social, your
yeah.
social at the time and not really the EIN. Are you saying maybe like, oh, my Capital One, it's paid off. You know what? I'm just going to use my personal Capital One towards business purchases until I get
Yes.
to the point where I get an actual business credit card. Is that what you meant?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Correct. It's gonna help you avoid a lot of accounting headaches. So yes, and the risk here is with the IRS, you know, that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to IRS audits, when they see that you're commingling funds between your business and your personal. So this is something called also like when you have your LLC and you have a corporation, it's called piercing the corporate veil. So you could essentially lose the protection that an LLC grants you, the legal protection that it grants you from protecting your own assets from if somebody sues you or something, just because you're doing that, because they're going to see, you know, you're not treating this business seriously like that. And that's called piercing the corporate veil. If you guys ever hear that phrase, that's what that means.
I hope to never hear
But
it.
yeah, I hope so. I hope nobody gets to hear that.
I
That's
mean, and
listening.
and so I imagine that must be extremely difficult for you if when you guys receive something and somebody's, I'm doing air quotes here, books, and it's basically all of their accounts and they're like a little bit came out of everywhere, figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. That leads me to the next one, which is getting a bookkeeping system going. Um, because at the end of the day, like we talked about, you're gonna just be left with a mess. So why not get it right from the beginning? You know, just be organized from the beginning. It's gonna save you so much more trouble. And you know, bookkeeping is not just a requirement to get your taxes done. That's a very common misconception. People think that, oh, they just gotta get their taxes done. Oh, I need to get my bookkeeping in order. Let me just tell you what my sales are, what I spend, and I'm done. In reality, that's not the case. You need to look at everything that's coming in and out of your business, and it's very easily missed if you're not looking at that on a recurrent basis and you're not getting that information straight from your bank accounts and your credit cards. So although Excel is okay for starting out, a lot of people do their bookkeeping in Excel, right? So they keep a tab of everything that's going on. I would still venture to say that you outgrow that after a certain point because you have a lot more volume, or also just the fact that you're human and you make mistakes, and you can easily make mistakes in Excel. When you use software, and you, for example, sync your bank accounts with your software, you're going to be kind of guaranteed, if you use the software properly, that you're not going to miss anything, and you're not going to be missing any important deductions, right? Because you're going to be seeing all your expenses coming through. You're not going to forget about that time when you went somewhere and you bought this because you lost the receipt and you didn't input it into your Excel worksheet. Does that make sense? No.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And you just touched on, I'd say, my Achilles heel as a business owner, and that is Excel, the dreaded Excel. I think I'm so bad at Excel, or just so illiterate when it comes to Excel, that it almost helped me in the beginning, because there was no option for me to attempt to do it in Excel because I was so bad. I was forced to hire an accountant.
Okay.
But yeah, no, my Excel skills have not improved much over time. But I didn't even know that. I didn't
But
even know
that's where
some
you have
people
your
attempt to
thinking.
do it on Excel.
A lot of people do. A lot of people have the everything on Excel. They just keep their basics on Excel, and it's good for. I still love Excel. I mean, Excel is a love language of accounting. So Excel is great, and it's good for keeping track of the cost of your inventory, any analysis that you need to make, any calculations. Excel is amazing. I use it all the time. But it's still important to use actual accounting software if you want to be taking a look at your numbers and knowing your numbers and getting a big picture of what your numbers look like for your business on a monthly basis. And like we mentioned before, to avoid a headache at year end.
All right. So what, as an Amazon seller, I won't even get into like multi-channel, international, anything like that. Just say Amazon seller in the US from like 50,000 feet, without diving too deep into it. What does that generally look like? Like, what are the main pieces in play for somebody to have a good or a great bookkeeping system in place?
Yeah. Well, you want to make sure that you're taking into account, you need to take into account all the marketplaces that you're selling from, right? So Amazon pays you on a bi-weekly basis, right? So every 2 weeks you get a deposit from Amazon. One of the hardest things for e-commerce sellers to do is to split out all the fees that Amazon charges you, which we all know is a lot, from that deposit, and reconcile it back to your bank account. Now, what does that mean? You need to properly say, so just because that money hits your bank account doesn't mean that it's automatically sales. You can't just say that that's income. You have to go and split that out and say a portion is sales, a portion is fees, a portion is advertisement, if you spend any money on PPC or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes very challenging. There's third-party software out there that makes it a lot easier for us now. The A2X helps a lot with that. So it allows you to properly split out all these fees for every deposit that comes through to your bank account, and it does it on an accrual basis, which is amazing. So basically, when you get those statements, let's say that you get paid September 3rd, that's not just sales from September 1st to the 3rd. It also has August sales on there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you put that all as income or fees for September in your accounting, that's not really a true picture of what happened, right? You want to make sure that you properly allocate August to August and September to September. So a tool like A2X helps you do that very efficiently. It helps you split out it helps you see really the sales and the fees that happen in each month.
Okay.
So that's something. The other thing is inventory. Inventory is huge for sellers, and a lot of people may not realize that they're not doing it right. Just to get like a good picture of their accounting, a lot of people just automatically expense it as cost of goods sold, but it's a good idea to keep track. Whatever option you decide to do for your taxes, whether you expense it right away or you use the accrual method, you want to make sure that you're keeping a tab on your inventory balance so that you know how much you're holding in inventory at any given time. So that's probably something that's like we can dive in deeper and even another podcast, because inventory is huge, and it's like a huge topic and controversial right now based on recent tax laws. So that's something that we can talk about forever.
Okay, so getting a good bookkeeping in place. We talked about not mixing or commingling funds between your business and personal. picking the right entity to start with, which seems really basic, but I think a lot of people drop the ball on that too. I definitely did. What would be, I guess this would be number 4. What would be number 4?
Okay, so let's say that you're starting out to get serious about your bookkeeping and you want to start doing your books using a software. A lot of people, a lot of sellers just go and start, like let's say they're using QuickBooks Online, they start categorizing all their transactions and they pull the report and they say, okay, I'm done. But a very big step that people forget is to actually reconcile your books. So there's something called reconciliation. So what does that do? You're reconciling, matching the transactions that are in your accounting records with the corresponding transactions in your bank statements. And you may think, okay, but why do I need to do that if I'm directly getting this information from the bank feed? Well, a lot of times even automatically syncing from your bank can create problems because you can actually find out if there's any inconsistencies or any glitches. Banks have glitches all the time. So there could be transactions, there could be deductions that you're missing out by not doing this very important step. You could be missing transactions, or you could have be duplicate transactions. You can be doubling up your expenses. So I would say that that's a really good tip to tell people, figure out how to reconcile your books if you don't have a bookkeeper, because that's a big deal.
And what's the learning curve like for anyone that's, I guess like me, when I first started, I was like, I attended, I don't know if I ever told you this, I attended like 3 night classes, and I was like, oh, accounting is important. I'm just going to take a few of these night classes. It was at Hammocks. I'm going to take a few of these night classes so that I can do it in my business. And the first class, I felt like a rock star, but then it got to double entry something. I think it was bookkeeping, and
Double
oh my
entry
Lord,
accounting.
oh my God.
Debits and credits, that's what that is.
That was a low point for me. I was like, oh my God, if I need to know this to be successful, I'm going to be a failure my whole life. So what would you say for anyone out there that's in that spot and they're like, oh, I'm just going to try to do it, and they're like DIY it or something? What?
I mean, I think after up to a certain point, right, it's good to have an accountant on your side, even if it's just someone helping you out at year end, CPA, to look over your books and to catch any mistakes that you may have been doing if you're still not ready to outsource, you know. I think that there's software out there these days that make it simple enough for you to attempt to do it yourself if you can't afford to outsource yet. So QuickBooks Online, I'm a fan of. I think it's very user friendly. There's tons of tutorials out there on how to do it. I do some consulting for people where I train them on I set up their books for them on QuickBooks Online, and I train them on how to continue doing them on an ongoing basis. These are startups, people that are starting out, that can't necessarily afford them. It's a way for me to help someone that's just starting out, but they're kind of lost in the whole accounting world, but they want to be organized and they really are passionate about their business, and they don't want to mess up. So this is something good to do. There's a learning curve because obviously it's not going to replace an accounting degree. But if you have a CPA on your side helping you with your taxes at the end of the year, it should be okay until you're ready to outsource. At the end of the day, it just comes down to when you're ready to outsource with anything else in an e-commerce business, right? Do I want to pay for it, or do I want to spend time doing it? Yeah. You have to make those decisions.
You're either going to pay a lot of money or a lot of time, but you're going to pay. Exactly. And I'll go out there on a limb, non-CPA, can't give advice and all that there. I highly advise hiring it out. There's so many other things from my side of the fence, the non-accounting side of the fence, that I could be focusing on to bring in a greater ROI on my business. And I'd rather just put this in the hands of a specialist. So
exactly. Like, what's your hourly rate worth? Like, what's your hour worth? Are you going to spend that on you doing the bookkeeping, trying to figure out the bookkeeping yourself, or bringing in more sales?
And in addition to the hourly rate, like say it took me only 2-3 hours, which is a lot, but that's 2-3 hours I could be spending with my family. But those 2-3 hours are not only gone, but the interruption of my creativity and my flow from this, because for me, I mean, you must love it. You've got to be like a numbers person and all that there. But me, again, if I have to sit in front of an Excel sheet for 2 or 3 hours, that's it. That's an Advil moment. I'm done.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's an emotional thing as well. A lot of people say that they hate it and it's draining for them. So I can totally see that. Spending the time doing something that you don't like and it's going to drain you, like it would drain you if you have to spend time doing that. Yeah, I definitely agree.
Okay, so I think so reconciliation, that seems pretty covered, and that seems quite difficult from my side of things, but you explained it I think where I understand it
It's
better
actually
than I've
not as
ever explained
complicated
it.
as it sounds. It's kind of just like a double check on your books. Make sure that you're recording everything that hit your bank account. That's a simple way to put it. That's the purpose of a bank reconciliation.
And would that reconciliation also be part of having a good bookkeeping system in place? That would be part of that system?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
People use some other third-party services out there, but they're missing this step. And we talk a lot about bookkeeping because it's the backbone of taxes, right? You know, you can't have a maximization of tax savings if you don't have good good bookkeeping in place. Say that 3 times fast. So yeah, you simply just cannot accurately prepare a tax return without having your books properly done for the year. That's just requirement number one for any tax preparer that you go to.
All right. What would be a number 5 in your top, like a top 7?
So don't forget common deductions for your reselling business or your Amazon selling business. So
Unpack
deductions,
that.
huh?
Unpack that, because that just blew my mind real quick.
Okay, so I mean, it's easy to miss if you don't have a bookkeeping system in place, like we talked about. You're not constantly looking at the money that's coming in and out of your accounts, and you can easily make errors in Excel. You can forget about an expense that you had. So we talked about this when we talked recently on another thing that we did on the group, but your ad spend and your tools. Before I get into the deductions, watch out for those. So for sellers, a lot of people are just like the shiny object syndrome. I think that's the phrase that we all use, that they want to just buy the next tool and use the next tool that sounds amazing to use in their business. But be careful because those can add up. If you find yourself that you're not using one, suspend it, for the time being. Like maybe don't use it. Suspend the subscription for the next few months if you're not using it. Just don't let money go out the door like that.
Like my gym membership.
Exactly. That's exactly how I would say it. And honestly, it's like, if you don't see it, you're not going to do anything about it, right? So yeah, that's definitely important. So the common deductions for Amazon sellers are like the Amazon fees, inventory, if you're expensing inventory for your tax return at the end of the year, your shipping expenses. A big one that people don't do is home office expenses. So if you work out of your home, you can deduct as part of your business a percentage based on the square footage of the office space that you have in consideration with the rest of your house. You can deduct home office expenses like utilities and things like that and get a big deduction. That can be a big deduction on your tax return.
For somebody, and that might even be me, I know it from I know it's a good thing to do, but for someone that doesn't know anything and that's just blown away by all accounting terms, when you say deductions, what does that really look like? Like break it down. What does that mean?
Okay. So deductions, what it means is you have income that you earn from your business, net income, right? So you have all your sales minus all your costs to buy your product minus all your expenses, and you're left with the bottom line, which is net income. You have to pay taxes on that. So when you go and do your tax return, deductions are going to help you reduce that amount. So basically, it's going to get you to a lower taxable income. So yeah. And deductions are all these business expenses too, right? So all these business expenses that allow you to get to your net income, those are deductions as well. So those were business expenses, business deductions. It's the same thing. You can use that interchangeably.
So let me see if I'm getting this, and so everybody else can follow along. If somebody had, after all said and done, $100,000 of taxable income, and they're going to do their taxes, and they realize, I've been paying for ClickFunnels, I've been paying for Helium 10, I've been paying for all this, and throughout the year, that is $20,000 in tools that they've spent. Just saying the tools. That would mean that their taxable income is no longer $80,000.
No, let me backtrack. I said that wrong. I was referring more to an individual return.
Okay.
So the net income from your business becomes income in your tax return, and then other deductions are gonna allow you to reach your taxable income. When it comes to your business, just looking at your business income statement, your sales minus your cost of goods sold minus all your expenses, like the tools that you mentioned, those expenses are called business deductions. That's going to get you to your net income. Okay. So that ultimately is taxable income on your return,
Okay. Awesome. What
So
about,
yeah, mileage. Mileage is huge. A lot of people think that mileage doesn't add up and they just forget to keep track of it. But any visits to suppliers, if you're doing arbitrage, any trips to the store, that's deductible mileage. So like keep a log. There's apps out there that make it simple. Like Mile IQ comes to mind. There's a few other ones.
what about flying
Um,
to China for the Canton Fair?
no, for sure. All travel fees like that, traveling to China for the fair, that's deductible. That's a business trip.
Oh, wow.
So
Do you know offhand if it's a high percentage that's deductible? Is it 100%? Is it
for travel, like the whole flight is deductible, assuming that the whole yeah,
business
the whole
class?
trip is business purpose. And meals while you're traveling on your business trip as well, they're 100% deductible. So yes, definitely keep that in mind, guys. If you're conducting business meetings or you're going to source somewhere out of town, that's a business travel expense. So and also like marketing, branding, any obviously that's kind of more obvious, but anytime you go on Fiverr and spend some money on getting a brand logo, anything really that's related to your business, don't forget those are all deductions.
What about hiring a consultant? Like if you're paying any like service fees, does that fall into that same category or?
Yes, 100%. Everything that's related, that's like ordinary and necessary for your business. Yeah, and that actually leads us to the other point that we wanted to talk about, which is don't forget about issuing 1099s. I don't know what your experience with that is when you started your businesses or how familiar you were with it, but a lot of people I think are just uneducated on the topic of who you have to issue a 1099 to. So that's
Educate
just
us.
yeah. So basically, just you're just required to send a Form 1099 to vendors or subcontractors in your business that you pay more than $600 in a year. Okay, in any given year. So more than $600, and there are exceptions. So that's like any individual, any LLC, any partnership, usually individuals, that you pay that amount of money, you have to issue them a 1099. So who's considered a vendor or subcontractor? Essentially, that's a person or a company that you have paid services to that isn't your employee. Okay, so not an employee, not someone that you pay payroll to, and not a VA that's in the Philippines or anything like that. It'll be somebody here in the US. And the exceptions, the list is long, but the most common ones are vendors that are operating as corporations. You don't have to issue them a 1099. So any vendor that's operating as an S Corp or a C Corp, you don't have to issue them a 1099, okay? And LLCs, so, we talked about LLCs earlier. For LLCs, you can elect with the IRS how you want to be taxed as an LLC, An LLC, you can elect to be taxed as an S corporation or a C corporation if you wanted to. So if an LLC is taxed as an S corporation or a C Corp, then you don't have to issue them a 1099, okay? And then payments of rent to or through real estate agents, that's also an exception, okay? Now, when it comes to credit card payments, a lot of e-commerce sellers, you pay vendors through PayPal. You don't have to worry about payments that you're paying through PayPal or places like that, because the IRS allows taxpayers to exclude those from any payments that you make by credit card, by debit card, gift card, or a third-party payment network with like PayPal. They're reported by the card issuers themselves. So PayPal is responsible for doing that. Okay.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, so that's something that you don't have to worry about. It's if you're individually paying, like if you're directly paying the person. But if you use PayPal, usually you're good. And then the W-9 is your best friend, right? So the W-9 is a form that you just get in the habit of doing this for your business. It's one of the smartest things you could do as a business owner to save you headaches. It's request a W-9 from any vendor that you expect to pay more than $600 before you pay them. So you use that as a normal business practice, and you get their mailing information, you get their tax ID number, and then they have to say there on the form if they're a corporation or not. So that way you know if you have to send them a 1099 or not. And you can easily just download that form online. Just Google it, W-9 form, just download the latest year, and you're good to go.
Oh, awesome. That's actually a huge knowledge bomb right there.
Yeah.
What about, that was 6. You have one more, one top tax tip for Amazon sellers, or did we cover? I think
The
it was
last one that I have, we touched on inventory, but the last one that I have, that's if you would ask me like a tax tip that most sellers are, things that sellers are not doing,
Sure.
or something that could help you plan out your taxes and just be more organized financially, is to make estimated tax payments, especially
Ugh.
if you have a growing business. And I know it's annoying, but even if you're not making estimate, I mean, which I recommend you should anyway, if you're putting the money aside and you're saving for taxes, which you should, might as well send it to the IRS every quarter, so you avoid paying that penalty, however small it may be at the end of the year, right? So just start saving money for your taxes. Keep that in mind as you're starting out. Even if you're just a sole proprietorship, you have to pay, the biggest tax hit that people get that they don't realize when they start their own businesses is self-employment taxes. You get hit with like 15% of any income that you earn, any bottom line income that you have in your business. You have to pay 15% roughly of taxes on that, on self-employment taxes, because you're considered both an employee and an employee, and that shocks people sometimes. So if you just like save for it, 15, 20, like conservatively save close to 30%, and just be prepared for that. And I think that will save a lot of headaches down the line.
Wow. Yeah, I could say I had a feeling before we started going through all this that it was going to feel like drinking out of a fire hose. I have that feeling now after I sit down with my accountant for a while. I feel wise and educated, but for those people that don't know the next steps on what to do next, or definitely that want to reach out to you, what are some, before I forget saying this, like what are the best ways for someone to get a hold of you?
Okay, so there's a few ways. I have my website. My business name is ecomowl.com, so you can go there. I also have it on Facebook, and I have a Facebook group that is meant to help e-commerce sellers and Amazon sellers, and we talk everything accounting there. I do go live on a weekly basis, and we talk all things accounting. I share tax tips with you guys often. So the group name is The Profit Principle.
The Profit
Principle.
The
accounting group for e-commerce and online sellers. So if you go on there, there's going to be a community of other sellers there that, you can ask any questions, and we can all, help each other out. That's the point of the community.
All right. Awesome. Last question I like to ask everybody on the podcast. If you're a reader, you're probably reading a whole bunch of accounting books, but if you're a reader, I ask everybody, what was your favorite book you ever read? Probably an accounting book.
I'm not a huge reader. The one I'm reading right now, I have it here. This one.
Tell me.
Big
Yeah,
Leap.
what is it? The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
All right. What do you think about it?
So, I mean, it's good so far. I haven't delved too deep into it, but I think it became highly recommended by a fellow entrepreneur. So it's about like the title says, it's about taking the big leap and leaving fears behind, and really positioning yourself in your life to not be afraid to take the next step and to grow your business and reach your goals.
Oh, wow. I haven't read that. I'm definitely writing it down. That's something I always need to read myself. Well, yeah, I want to be super respectful of your time. Thank you so much for coming on here. And I think as soon as we end this, I'm going to try to set up the next one that we can do together. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Liked what you heard and want to stay connected? Join our Facebook group or find me anywhere on social media at Wizards of Amazon, or text the word Amazon to 69922.